Lama was a young boy with eyes that learned to stay lowered and a voice that learned when not to speak. After his mother passed away, the house that once felt warm slowly turned into a place where he existed more as a responsibility than a child. His stepfather, Karim, and stepmother, Salma, never raised their hands against him, but their words, expectations, and constant reminders of what they had done for him weighed heavier than any slap. They lived in a modest neighborhood, respectable from the outside. Neighbors believed Lama was lucky fed, clothed, and enrolled in school, but inside the house, everything came with a price. Every meal, every notebook, every shirt was counted and later brought up as a debt Lama would someday have to repay. From a young age, Lama learned discipline the hard way. He woke before dawn to help around the house, cleaned after everyone, and studied late into the night because education felt like the only door that might open for him. Salma often said, "We didn't ask to raise you," whenever Lama made the smallest mistake. Karim stayed mostly silent, but his silence carried agreement. The moment that changed everything came on a quiet evening. Salma dressed carefully, applying makeup with satisfaction, while Karim checked his phone. They were going out to dinner in an expensive place Lama had only heard about from classmates. As they prepared to leave, Salma casually said, "Make sure your card has enough balance." Lama froze. "My card?" he asked softly. Karim finally looked at him. "Yes. You earn from your part-time tutoring, don't you? You live here, eat here. It's time you contribute." Lama's heart sank. The money he saved was meant for college applications, something he never spoke about because dreams felt dangerous in that house. "But, I'm not going with you," Lama said carefully. Salma smiled, not kindly. That's the point. They left without another word, taking not just his money but something deeper, his last belief that effort alone would earn him fairness. That night, Lama sat alone at the table long after they were gone. He didn't cry. Something inside him hardened, quietly, firmly. He opened his notebook and wrote one sentence: "I will never beg again." What Lama didn't know yet was that this moment, the dinner he paid for but never attended, was the first step toward a future where he would no longer be invisible, dependent, or silent. The boy who stayed behind would not remain behind forever. After that night, something in Lama changed, not loudly, not in ways anyone in the house noticed. He still woke early, still completed his chores, still spoke with respect. But inside him, a careful distance began to grow. He stopped expecting kindness. And when expectations die, clarity is born. Lama started tracking everything. He wrote down how much he earned from tutoring neighborhood children. He noted every time Salma asked him to buy groceries, every bill Karim forgot his wallet for, every small expense that was somehow always his responsibility. He didn't argue. He didn't complain. He collected facts. At school, Lama's teachers began to notice his quiet excellence. He was the kind of student who never raised his hand, yet always had the right answer. One teacher, Mr. Hattie, called him aside one afternoon. "You have potential," he said gently, "but potential needs a path." That night, Lama researched scholarships in secret. He applied to programs that supported students from difficult households. He wrote essays late into the night, not about hardship alone, but about resilience. He didn't paint himself as a victim, he wrote, as someone who was learning to stand. Meanwhile, the behavior at home worsened. Salma began inviting relatives over and presenting Lama as the boy we saved. She laughed when guests praised her generosity. Karim started reminding Lama that he owed them loyalty and obedience. The word family was used often, always, when they wanted something. Then came the second dinner. This time, they didn't even ask. Salma simply took Lama's phone, opened his banking app, and transferred the money herself. "You should be grateful," she said. "Many children would be on the streets." Lama nodded, but inside, he realized something important. They didn't see him as a son. They saw him as a resource. That realization freed him. A month later, Lama received an email at school. His hands shook as he read it. Scholarship approved. Housing included. For the first time in years, Lama allowed himself a smile. But he didn't rush home with the news. He understood power now. Power wasn't shouting. It was timing. He continued saving, secretly moved his earnings to a new account, and collected documents. He prepared his exit the way someone prepares for war, not with anger, but with strategy. His step-parents noticed nothing. They were too comfortable, too sure that Lama would always stay. What they didn't know was that every meal they charged him for, every insult disguised as care, every unpaid dinner, they were building a debt of their own, and Lama was getting ready to collect, not with revenge fueled by rage, but with truth that would leave them exposed and empty-handed. The day Lama left did not come with shouting, slammed doors, or dramatic speeches. It arrived quietly, like sunrise, inevitable and unstoppable. By then, Lama had learned the most important lesson of survival. Never announce your escape. He waited, he watched, he prepared. Salma and Karim grew bolder with time. They spoke openly about expenses, complained about bills, and reminded Lama again and again that he was lucky to live under their roof. They discussed future plans in front of him as if he were furniture. One evening, Salma said casually, "Next month we're thinking of a short vacation. You can cover groceries while we're gone." Lama looked up from his book and nodded. Inside, He marked the date. At school, Lama finalized his transfer. His scholarship counselor helped him arrange housing and legal documentation. When she asked about his guardians, Lama answered honestly but carefully. He provided records, bank statements, and notes he had kept for months. "This is financial exploitation," she said quietly. Lama didn't feel anger hearing those words. He felt relief. His experience had a name, and when something has a name, it can be addressed. The night before he left, Lama packed his bag slowly. He didn't take much clothes, books, his mother's old watch, and the notebook where he had written everything. He left behind the expensive gifts his step-parents had once given him, as proof of their kindness. He didn't need them. Before sunrise, he placed an envelope on the dining table. Inside were copies, receipts, transfers, notes, dates at the top of the page. He wrote, "I have paid more than my share. Do not contact me again. Any further attempt will be documented." He walked out just as the morning call to prayer echoed through the streets. By noon, Salma noticed his room was empty. Panic turned to rage. Kareem called Lama, repeatedly no answer. Salma accused neighbors of influencing him. They searched his belongings, then found the envelope. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. They tried calling relatives, hoping someone would pressure Lama into returning. But when questions were asked, Lama's records spoke louder than their stories. Whispers began. The image of the generous step-parents cracked. A week later, Kareem received a formal notice from a legal aid office requesting clarification about financial responsibilities and unauthorized transactions involving a minor. They had never expected consequences. They had assumed Lama was powerless. Meanwhile, Lama sat in his small dorm room, sunlight falling across his desk. For the first time, his money was his. His time was his. His future felt open, but the story wasn't finished. Because true revenge is not escape alone, it is transformation. Witnessed by those who once believed you would never rise. And that moment was coming. Months passed, and Lama's life began to take a shape he had never imagined for himself. He woke up without fear. He studied without interruption. He ate meals without calculating their cost and guilt. Freedom, he learned, was not loud, it was peaceful. With the scholarship covering tuition and housing, Lama focused on his studies and part-time work. His confidence grew, not because life was suddenly easy, but because it was finally fair. Professors noticed his discipline. Friends noticed his quiet wisdom. For the first time, Lama was seen for who he truly was. Back at his former home, the silence lingered. Salma and Kareem struggled more than they admitted. Without Lama's income, their budget cracked. Bills piled up. Relatives who once praised their kindness began asking questions they didn't like answering. The story they had told, Dove, sacrifice, and generosity, no longer fit the facts being whispered. Then came the final reckoning. A mediation notice arrived, followed by a formal inquiry. The financial records Lama had kept were undeniable. Transfers made without consent, expenses forced onto a dependent, patterns too consistent to dismiss as coincidence. They weren't punished harshly, but they were exposed, and exposure was enough. Salma stopped boasting. Kareem avoided conversations about family. The respect they once demanded quietly dissolved into discomfort. They learned, too late, that control is fragile when built on exploitation. One evening, Lama received a message from Kareem. It was short. "We did what we could. You didn't have to leave like that." Lama stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he replied, not with anger, not with explanation, but with truth. "I paid my way. I owe nothing more." He blocked the number. Years later, Lama stood at a graduation ceremony, his mother's watch on his wrist, his notebook safely tucked away at home. As his name was called, applause filled the hall, not for survival, but for achievement. His revenge was never cruelty. It was clarity. It was boundaries. It was becoming everything they said he never could, and in doing so, Lama taught them the lesson they never expected to learn. You cannot raise someone by breaking them, and you cannot use someone without someday paying the price.